How you doing? Hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Alioth First Impressions. It's come out just recently, and I would say it's a little bit different from my expectations, but we've had some time to play, right? We've now been in this Loki meta for a while, so I think we've got a good idea of how good it is compared to the meta, so should have a lot to talk about. Let's begin. Alright, the first thing I do want to talk about, I'm participating in a tournament right now. It's called the Johnson Cup. It's been 1 round per day, and we've made it to the 3rd round, so that's pretty exciting. This one's getting broadcasted on Alphonse NZ, which also happens to be one of my teammates. We're playing with W and W Los and Alphonse NZ. Feel free. It's starting at 11 AM CST, which is probably around the time uploaded. So if you do want to watch me and my teammates play some, quote unquote high level gameplay, feel free to tune in. So that's something I wanted to get out the way. Next thing, let's talk about the card of the day. We're looking at Alioth here. So Alioth we do have is pretty interesting card in particular. It is a 6 energy 5 power card. On reveal, destroy all enemy cards played here, including unrevealed cards. So this has the potential to just clean out a game where if you have priority and you can kind of manipulate the board state where your opponent wants to play in one particular lane, you can just play Alioth, bam, destroys everything there, and you can win pretty freely, honestly. There are some good synergies. Galactus, I would say, stands out the most as being the most synergistic because you're playing in one lane, and usually Galactus you need to have priority for it to go off. So if you have priority, you can just follow it up with Alioth and get a clean win there. Next up, we have Wave. I think Wave makes a lot of sense because it prevents your opponent from playing multiple cards. So you wave and then bam, you drop the Alioth in the right lane. That's another easy way to win. Lockdown, same thing. You're locking down one lane, so they can't really, it becomes a 50-50 in terms of where you want to go. And usually, if the game state makes sense, you know where your opponent wants to play, so you could just lock it down that way as well. And then Ramp just allows you to do things like Daredevil with Electro and then Alioth, that follow-up card. So that's just another easy synergy that you have with this. So do think there's definitely some potential for this card, but let's talk about it how it feels right now, today, playtesting, right? There are some questions, right? Should you buy? I still think it's a good use of Spotlight this month. I would say it's not as heavy a priority. Like I'd maybe move it down from S at the very top to A, but still really good. I do think Loki is currently stronger, so if you're like deciding, ooh, should I be swapping my decks over to account for Alioth? I don't think so. I think Loki decks usually have more upside in what they're doing than what currently Alioth's doing. I do think it'll be more playable past Loki meta, but that's a caveat because one of the more common synergies with Alioth right now is to use it with Wave, and Mobius will shut that as well. So honestly think there's a good chance it becomes like relegated to more of a Galactus style deck or a Ramp style deck than like being a free flowing put it in everything level that Loki can be sometimes. So still think it's a good use of Spotlight. It's 6,000 tokens, and it's a card that will definitely have some presence, right? Its effect is really strong, so it's hard for it to not have any presence at all. But I do think currently you're going to be dealing with Loki decks, and Loki decks don't struggle too much unless you're really efficiently using Wave. And also that even once Loki passes, I do think Mobius will kind of also hinder this card in some way, since you won't be able to do that like Wave shutdown combo that you were hoping to do. So generally I think this is just a strong card and very playable. So I think it's a strong card, but it has some weaknesses in the metagame where I don't think you necessarily need to get it right now. But it's still a good use of tokens, still 6,000, where the next ones coming up are going to be a little bit less. So you can still spend your resources here. It's just not, in my opinion, after, some hours, I wouldn't say it's the most important card, right? Like if I were to redo the tier list or something, Loki would be near the top, Mobius would still be at the top, right? Alioth would be a little bit below, but still there. And then we have Ravonna just like struggling, I guess. So that's my thoughts on it. You can get it. I wouldn't say it's a 100% need to get. It is next to Snow Guard, which is a great card, but it is 3,000 tokens. So if you want Snow Guard that badly, you can get it yourself. But still decent. And then here we have some of the synergies. We have Wave, Galactus, Professor X, Daredevil. These kind of things aren't too surprising, right? It's really good if you can limit your opponent's play patterns, and that's what the top do. Sandman also does that. I mean, they all really do that, except for maybe Electro and Daredevil, which are kind of used together to kind of guarantee the Alioth proc, right? So if you have Daredevil and Electro, turn 5, you know exactly where your opponent's going to play, and you can follow it up with the Alioth. Now, it's a lot of effort, in my opinion, for that combo. I don't know if it's necessarily worth it right now when you could just play Loki and Quinja and steal everything. So you really have to weigh those options. Is it really worth using all those resources to kill a 5-drop? Maybe not. So there's that caveat right now where I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to, instantly win the game for you, unless you're playing Galactus, where it will, or you have a good wave setup. Then yeah, it can, right? So it has the potential to win you the game. However, currently in this metagame, it doesn't really consistently do that. So you really have to weigh, is this something I want to spend my resource on? So just be careful about that. So next up, we're going to be looking at the spotlights and just kind of comparing it to what I had at the beginning of the month and where we are now. So taking a look, I had it at S tier. I would say I'd probably move the top down to A tier. I think it's not super important you get it, but it's still a good option. So they'd be the same as the without him lucky. I think they're very similar. So I wouldn't say it's like, oh my god, you have to get it. It's more like, oh, this is a good deal. But if you don't want it, it's not like, oh my god, I'm judging you, anything like that. So that's where I'll change it from beginning of the month to now. Just move the S tier down to A tier. Still means it's good, just not like, oh my god, if you're missing all 3, you have to get it. I don't think so. All right, next up, of course, we have some deck builds as well. That's what I always like to have here, just so that if you did get the card and you want to build, I do think there are some pretty decent, powerful decks to build here. So first off, here we do have, I would say this has been like the statistically more consistent version of Alioth right now. Pretty much every Alioth deck runs Wave. That's something I've noticed, like where Wave just gives you the ability to shut down your opponent, and it just is a nice follow-up. But here you're playing the move deck, the Silky Smooth essentially move deck, and you just get to follow it up turn 5 with Wave into Alioth. So Wave right now is being played because it's a good tech into Loki. So it's not necessarily that you need to play Wave. I just think it worked super well with Alioth, so everyone's just teching it in, and then Wave is just like a nice follow-up. So this seems to be the current strategy if you are going to be playing a non-Loki deck anyways, right? Wave on 5 and then follow it up with your big drop on 6. So it seems to work well here, and Alioth just a nice follow-up. So definitely seems relatively strong. So this has been doing really well in testing, so feel free to try something like this. You can always adjust cards if you don't think you need Nebula or something like that, or Angela, right? Angela's usually comboed with Kitty, but there's no Kitty, so I could definitely see you changing this up for something else entirely. Next up, we have Galactus. I would say Galactus is the other best performing level card. So this one is a little bit not full Galactus. You are using Daredevil Electro, so there is some notion of respecting the Alioth potential with the Daredevil Professor X or the Daredevil Alioth with Electro combo. So that's kind of what you're doing here, and then hopefully you can kind of win the other lane with like a Hobgoblin into Orca or something like that. So, or Wave into Orca or something like that. So that's kind of the idea with this particular list. Seems to be doing well for people. Then we have a more ramp centric version here where you are using all the ramp tools that you're accustomed to. You've got the Sandman, you've got the Black Panther, you've got the Doctor Doom Odin combo. So this is less. You still have Galactus because Galactus can give you that way of insta winning, but this is more of a ramp version, a ramp deck, but just Texan that Alioth, Texan that Galactus for those like surprise plays that maybe your opponent is not expecting. So definitely seen this do some work. Leans a little bit more heavy to the ramp compared to the previous list, which leans a little bit more heavy to the Galactus finisher. And then next up, we do have just a regular control deck. So this is High Evolution Lockdown. All right, Lockdown's another list that can really use Alioth because you are going to Professor X or Storm a lane and just force your opponent to play in a particular lane, which makes it very easy for your Alioth to do some work. So that's kind of the idea here. You still have your other combos with Hulk, with Doctor Doom, things like that, but you do just add this Alioth to be a nice finisher for you if that's the game plan you want to go. So definitely a cool list. Makes sense. Seems to work well. So definitely something you can try if you like that type of playstyle. And then the last one I do have is a little bit more destroy centric here. So this one uses more destroy pieces. You've got the X-23, you've got the Carnage, Venom, all the regular destroy things. It does let you play Galactus a little bit more free. The X-23 gives you ramp for the Alioth. So instead of having to use Wave or Electro, now you can also just play X-23, destroy, and then have that ramp go off earlier. And then you get to play Null and Death, which are always great. Also works really well into Galactus, so it doesn't really mess you up too much. And then you still just get Doctor Doom just in case you want to have that more solid AoE style finish play. So definitely seen this do decent work, but those are like the vibes of Alioth decks. You're just kind of teching it in. I think that's usually how new decks start. You tech in and then you adjust. So day one, you're not going to make a whole new Alioth list that is completely like different than anything you've ever seen. But as things go by, you'll see if a new Alioth list makes sense, or you'll just adjust lists that people have previously made, things like Destroy and stuff like that, and then fit that in. So we'll see in the coming days where it fits, but we'll also see once your Mobius comes out and see if that does affect the meta in a meaningful way where you have to redesign all the decks that people like to play. So that's the current thoughts on Alioth. It's decent. It's not bad. I would just say Loki's better, and that kind of weighs into how you're playing all the decks, right? Because every single deck you make right now, you have to think, okay, how does this match up into Loki? And if you don't have an answer, you can't play it. So you need to keep that in mind, right? That all the decks being played right now have that kind of constraint. So there are decks that are better, but they're not good into the Loki meta, so they just don't show up. So it's doing well, right? But I do think that's because Wave is a good Loki tech answer, and you kind of want to be playing Wave with Alioth anyway. So it just kind of fits together. So it makes it have a chance into the Loki matchups where some other decks don't run Wave and they don't have that kind of answer there. So that's my thoughts on the card overall after a couple hours or so. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts on it. Do you like it? Do you not? Do you think Loki just makes me not care about this, or there's some potential here? I definitely know Goliath players. I mean Galactus, not Goliath. Galactus players are just like, yay, new card, new tool, and they're just like slamming this. But other than that, I do want to know like people who are not playing Galactus, what's your thoughts on this, right? So overall, that's what we got feel free to check out the tournament if you like. But take care of yourselves and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
EducatedCollins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow, snap. Your skills will be improving.